Hello, I'm Daniel Farrell from OpenDaylight.
And Fatih Dirmenci from OPNFV community. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the interest you are showing here, because the area we are talking about this morning or during this week, continuous integration and continuous delivery, is a really crucial area for us, for all of us to be successful in open source communities. During this upcoming 10 minutes, we will talk about our experiences when it comes to how we solved some of the common challenges we have in continuous integration and continuous delivery area from our community's perspectives, and those things really applicable to any open source community out there trying to build the software, test that, integrate that, and make available to end users. So as I mentioned, I am from OPNFV community, and I'm not sure how many of you know what OPNFV stands for. It's basically Open Platform for Network Functions Virtualization. It's an open source project which was established about 3.5 years ago to realize XCI NFV architecture and implement this next generation telecom network infrastructure using open source technologies such as cloud, virtualization, and so on. And as we all know, the networks today, they are built using proprietary hardware and software, and really the open source is changing how things are done. And in order to see how viable or how good those open source technologies are, the OPNFV project was established. And OPNFV is kind of a unique project. If you look at OpenStack or OpenDaylight, those open source projects generally develop certain technologies, and they do continuous integration as part of their workflows, and they provide fast feedback to their developers and their users. And these communities generally work pretty close to SCM, Git, Gerrit systems, and their target is mainly their developers. And OPNFV was established to fill this gap, to ensure that the components or technologies developed by these open source communities are put together, tested together as a system, and find out if there's any missing feature, functionality there, or if there are any bugs there. And so OPNFV, in summary, is a system integration and testing project done as open community. And how we do that? We basically, the telecom networks or NFV stuff is, when we first start, we initially started with OpenStack as our virtual infrastructure manager. And then we took OpenStack, for example, and then we tested OpenStack as it is using Neutron and default networking options. And over time, we moved towards the SDN area, and we started working with OpenDaylight community. And this time, instead of using Neutron, we replaced the Neutron backend and put OpenDaylight there. And this time, we tested this combination. And this was our first release about 3 years ago. And we basically released the integrated OpenStack and OpenDaylight platform to our end users. And we basically started talking to and working together with these communities to ensure that whatever we found there as missing or problematic, they get fixed directly in upstream. So OPNFV doesn't do development in its own community, but it works upstream. So it's our motto, upstream first. And we go and fix those things there. And this basically means that continuous integration is crucial for OPNFV community, like other communities. Since we are an integration project, we have to ensure that we automate these things, and we iterate much faster, we test things much faster, and we provide feedback much faster. And over time, we increased the number of combinations we support. And as part of our release, we had more than 50 different combinations. And some of the projects we are working with, you can see on this diagram, we have more than these components. I think we work with more than 10 different communities, and we bring all these different components together, we test them, and we see if they work, and we provide feedback. But over time, we realized that this is very slow, and we made our calculation. It took at least 6 months to provide feedback to upstream communities, which is basically not continuous integration. The reason for this was like we were using stable releases of upstream components. And then we started thinking about how we can solve this. And OpenDaylight was the first community we started working with. We asked Daniel and other nice guys from OpenDaylight community to help us with this, shared our problems, concerns, and then we got their help.
Yep. So when OPNFV was born, we were a little bit older. We'd had a little bit more time to kind of mature as a project, learning a lot of lessons from OpenStack, copying a lot of your infrastructure. So we had the position where we were able to see these new challenges coming and prepare ourselves for them. Again, OPNFV, to rehash, is trying to do continuous integration on delivered open source projects like OpenDaylight's, not sort of internal unit test level CI or whatever, but our full thing that we're shipping out to customers and users and standing up in complicated deployments. OPNFV wants to take that and do CI on that. And this was a strange situation, right? We needed to prepare ourselves as a community, as a set of communities for working in this integration. We started to see these questions come in from developers in both of our communities. For example, I could be an OPNFV developer and be trying to set up one of these deployments with an SDN controller using OpenDaylight as a backend or something and running into some bug, and I'm talking to my OpenDaylight friends and they say, oh yeah, we know about that one, that was fixed last week, great, no problem. And then OPNFV developers, okay, so we can get that into one of our releases to use in our ecosystem in 6 months or a year, depending on your release schedule. And we're gonna be blocked on stuff until then. Obviously not a good answer, right? Or we would want developers working together to test solutions that they're collaboratively building and testing, building an OpenDaylight, testing an OPNFV, and to get that quick feedback cycle that developers are used to. We have these same types of problems. We would end up having OpenDaylight developers see the value in these big labs that OPNFV can stand up using real installers. So we're using DevStack or something in our CI because it's quick and easy to work with, but OPNFV is using proper OpenStack installers, using virtual and bare metal deploys, the kind of infrastructure that we really care about and would like more access to. So we have OpenDaylight developers working on bugs with that great infrastructure, but they want to test from latest master, not sort of our 6 month ago release version. We ran into this class of problems and realized that we needed to build continuous delivery pipelines. That for a project like OPNFV that does CI on released artifacts, it's kind of a fact of nature that the integrated projects have to provide continuous delivery pipelines into such a project. So for OPNFV to really do CI, for it to not just do testing on previously released artifacts, but continuously test, continuously integrate the projects that it's consuming, the consumed projects have to provide continuous delivery pipelines. So this is our big lesson. So as we started implementing this, we, I think, followed a path that probably many of you have followed different iterations of. There's no magic about this particular one, but we'll talk about it briefly. We started encountering many different types of users, right? So we had people who wanted to deploy against CentOS or Ubuntu or SUSE. They needed their own specific type of packaging logic to lay down OpenDaylight on the file system. We realized that just laying down OpenDaylight on the file system was totally insufficient, that we needed to have all kinds of configuration knobs for setting up HA deployments, and in your weird particular environment, we need to tweak IP addresses in a certain way or something, right? So these are configuration knobs. These aren't sort of OpenDaylight internal logic. These are how we do integration deploy work that OPNFV is doing a great job of validating. How we do that type of logic and test that and do it in repeatable ways that are owned by the projects themselves and not owned by OPNFV. So another lesson we learned is that the configuration management logic is too complicated for OPNFV, the integrator, to really know for all of that huge diagram of projects that are being integrated. Each of those projects needs to be responsible for knowing their configuration knobs and providing easy tools for the consumer OPNFV to work with. So we started building configuration management tooling. Puppet was kind of the norm, the only major option at the time. So we started there, and we've since added Ansible support. We also, of course, try to ship things that are nice for users, that aren't just such big, complicated tools for big, complicated projects like OPNFV. So we can reuse some of these abstractions, so we can build on our packaging logic, build on our configuration management logic, and then basically for free get things like containers or VMs that users can just run Docker run -it OpenDaylight/ODL, and then have a craft shell and poke around a bit, not maybe able to do as complicated things as they would be able to do in a full triple O deployment or something, but get their feet wet.
Yeah. So this is all real. We are not just sharing our dreams with you. And this resulted us to create a new initiative together with OpenDaylight and other communities we are working with, which is called OPNFV Cross-Community CI-XCI. And with the help of our friends from OpenDaylight community and from OpenStack community, we are now able to deploy OpenStack from trunk, OpenDaylight from trunk, and we are expanding our scope and we already start talking to all these different communities, such as ONAP community, which is very important in telco world, and we need to ensure that we can deploy ONAP from trunk as well. And we are working with CNCF community, and we are bringing Kubernetes. And what this will result in is that, as I mentioned, like our previous way of working gave us, our developers and upstream communities, feedback in 6 to 13 months. Now we can reduce that feedback to weeks, and we can reduce that feedback time to days. Currently, we are on a week times, like we can deploy OpenStack and OpenDaylight together from master on a weekly basis, but we want to push that even further and do that on a daily basis. And what is even more interesting is that we want to do that per patch basis. And we have plans to look at Zool to ensure that we enable this cross-project, cross-repo type of dependency and dependent pipelines to ensure that whoever does a development in OpenStack, if that patch depends on OpenDaylight, we should be able to put that combination together on our labs and give feedback based on that combined scenario rather than standalone. So in summary, I think we had lots of advancements in this area, and we have been working together pretty closely, not just with OpenDaylight or OpenStack, but with 8 other communities. And this resulted in creation of this OpenCI initiative, which we came together end of March, and we start talking about these things as a whole, like a big family. And we understood that this is a problem we have to solve, and we can't solve this as small or standalone communities. OpenStack, yeah, OpenStack is great, but we need to work together to ensure that we have all this experience put together, and we work on these things together to make things even faster, make things even better, and make things even easier for our users. So if you are interested in these things, just join us and then help move things forward much faster than before. Thank you.